Hey, welcome to my Warframes Where They Are Now series, a little series I've had brewing in the back of my mind since the early days of Warframe, quote unquote. I'm going to put this little intro at the beginning of every video in this series. If you've heard this once or more, feel free to skip it. This is just my opinion and is not guaranteed to be fact. Remember, with Warframe, everyone plays at least a little different from each other. That's why there's 52 frames as of making this intro, of course. That being said, I do plan on being as objective as I can with this series. But bias will always be a potential problem, and will definitely shine through in certain episodes, if not all. Now, that being said, I hope you enjoy the series. September 2nd, 2023. Today we're talking about my second favorite frame, Chroma. Now, I'm not sure what the general opinion is, however, I have heard a lot of people saying that Chroma is one of the worst frames in the game. And to that, I would like to know why. Base stats on a level 30 Chroma Prime are 425 armor, 300 energy, 300 health, 300 shields, and 1 sprint speed. Chroma's passive is he has an additional jump. A bit strange if you ask me, but it's whatever. I do find it fun to use. Definitely not the most practical of passives, but it's fun. Alright, so his first ability, Spectral Scream. I'll be honest, this one kinda irritates me. The ability itself kinda sucks. You breathe an element of whatever you have active at the enemies. It locks you out of your various weapons and whatnot. But it does let you swap elements. My main issue with it though is the fact that if you helmet it off, you do end up losing the ability to swap elements. I did end up going ahead and doing that on mine recently. For a while I had the 4th ability helmet off, but I ended up swapping over the 1st because I realized I don't really swap elements in missions that much. Except for the very beginning of it. Honestly, I just want to get back in the habit of swapping, my color palettes before I go in because, again, I don't really swap in mission, aside from, like I said, the beginning. As for the augment, Afterburn, upon deactivation, Chroma will launch elemental projectile, dealing 100 damage for each second the ability was active for a maximum of 500 damage. I don't foresee me using this. It does actually get an ability strength buff. I will say I don't know if that affects the maximum damage. I've never used Afterburn. I've also had absolutely no desire to use Afterburn because it doesn't seem all that good in my opinion. Alright, here's where shit gets a little complicated. Elemental Ward. This one behaves differently depending on what element you have equipped, and honestly is the main reason why you'd be switching elements. But let's dive right into it, I suppose. As for heat, you get a health bonus as well as the damage around you in the form of heat damage with a 10% status chance. The status chance is not affected by mods, sadly. As for electricity, it is, increases your shield capacity as well as it has a 25% status chance that is affected by mods, and a 10 times damage reflection multiplier. And it has its own radius, whereas the rest of them seem to just have a default range of 12. The electricity only has a range of 10. Remember that. As far as the Toxin one, the Toxin does damage whenever you holster a weapon, and the holster damage duration by default is 3 seconds. If I'm not mistaken, it does in the form of Toxin damage. I mean, wouldn't that fucking make sense? It does increase your reload speed, and it also has a status chance of 50%, which is also affected by mods. The only one that isn't affected by mods is the heat status chance. Everything else on here is affected by mods. As for the cold option, it increases your armor. Yeah, the cold status is also a damage reflection multiplier. It's actually weaker than the electric one, so remember that if you're planning on swapping between them. And it also has a 25% status chance. I usually use mostly the heat and the cold ones. I find them to be the most useful for what I use them for. I'll get into that after we talk about all of his abilities and shit, as per usual. As for the augment, Everlasting Ward, allies that leave the radius will retain the effect for 100% of the remaining duration. I have been trying to squeeze this into my build for quite some time, mainly because of Archons. It would be nice to just have everybody right next to me and I activate the thing and then they're good for a while. As for his 3rd ability, Vex Armor, when shields are hit, he and his allies get stronger armor. When his health is hit, weapon damage increases for everybody. I will say, this is the ability that I use the most, and I feel like that's kind of true for anyone who uses Chroma, whether you're a main or not, doesn't matter. I'm not a Chroma main, I use him a lot because he's good for a lot of the shit that I do. But anyways, the armor increase starts out at 350 and the damage increase starts out at 275. These are percentages as opposed to just, flat increases. I have mine currently sitting at, 962 for the armor and 756 for the damage. At one point, I had the armor at over 1,000. I think the damage was at like 800 something. Because I had 5 Tau Forged Archon shards in them for that. I ended up jumping back down to normal shards because I realized, yeah, I don't really need that much of a damage increase. That's kind of stupid at that point. As for the augment, Vexing Retaliation. Taking 150 damage will trigger a 9-meter burst. Shield damage will cause a puncture status effect, while health damage causes a blast status effect. I don't understand a situation where you'd want to use this, at least for the blast damage. I will say the puncture damage I could see a use case for, but realistically, fucking why? And the only reason why I say that is because when it comes to Vex armor, you're already getting a stupid damage buff. Like, there's no real reason to use this. Because, like, what's the point of using that when I could just point gun in direction and pull trigger? Especially when said gun is doing, 8 times its normal damage. No, but in all seriousness though, I honestly don't ever foresee me using this. If you do, cool. Honestly, let me know if you have a build with that in the comments. I'd be curious to see what you're doing with that. To be fair, I'm always curious when it comes to strange builds when it comes to Warframe. I'm always a big fan of finding out the weird shenanigans that people come up with. Alright, as for his 4th ability, Effigy, Chroma peels himself, and then half of him just kind of sits there and acts like a turret. It's not as good as it used to be. Granted, that may just be the fact that when I was first using Chroma, there wasn't nearly as hard content as there is now as far as DPS checks go. But I digress. He's not all that great, and honestly, it's one of the things that I really hope they buff in the future when it comes to Chroma. Like, I honestly think the rest of his kit's fine where it's at, even the first ability as much as I hate it. Because of the fact that, like, oh, not every single ability has to be good on a frame. I mean, hell, look at Mesa, she's a 4-frame. Granted, yes, her 3rd ability is amazing, but she is a 4-frame for all intents and purposes. I do wish that Chroma had something other than just the 2nd and 3rd as far as use case goes, because this is why I'll openly say that Chroma is boring to play a lot of the time. He is incredibly useful, which is why he's my 2nd favorite frame, but he is really boring to play because of the fact that his holy crap neat ability is not all that useful. The Effigy does have a credit multiplier as well as a extra credit chance and speed increase, armor reduction, etc., etc. Basically, the side effects of not having to wear an extra skin, and then for whatever reason a credit multiplier. I don't understand that one. I always thought that was kind of weird. As for the augment though, Guided Effigy, you can cast and hold to make Effigy move to your aim point. So basically wherever you have your cursor, or well, actually I guess cursor. I was gonna call it something else for systems, but I honestly don't know what the fuck to call it on systems, so I guess cursor works? But anyways, once he gets there, he does 4,000 damage a second and restores 5 energy for each enemy in its path. It roars on arrival, stunning nearby enemies. I do want to tinker with this at some point just to see, what it's about, have some fun with it, but I genuinely don't see me using this in a serious manner. Alright, as for my build, I know up top it says Archon Fire, but that's the build that I use more often than not. Take a wild guess what I use them for. Anyways, obviously corrosive projection, but aside from that, it's entirely duration and strength. I find that I don't really need any more range than he already has. Granted, if I had a way to squeeze it on there, wouldn't be a bad idea to be fair, because I mean range is always good. Range is one of the most important things when it comes to ability building. Aside from that, Molt Reconstruct to keep my ass alive, and yeah, I run heat, so you know where I'm going with that. I also have 5, as I mentioned before, I have 5 of the red Archon shards for ability strength. So how does this frame fare for Deviri? Well, as usual, he's pretty solid for regular Deviri. I will say for Steel Path Deviri, he's fucking awesome, because he's one of the frames where it doesn't really matter what weapons you get stuck with, because of his damage buff. Aside from that, though, he is genuinely fun to get, and if you get him and a good weapon, you can go pretty damn far into Steel Path Deviri. Matter of fact, he's one of the ones I get pretty damn far with. Like he's, I want to say he's in the top 3 as far as the ones that I get the farthest with. I also will say that the status decree build is also a ton of fun to get with him. Yeah, there's no guarantee for it, which is why I don't, blatantly be like, oh yeah, because of this, he's amazing. It's like, when you get it, it's awesome. But there's no guarantee because of the roguelite nature of it. But to be honest, that's what makes it fun. Chroma is a frame that I feel is, at least in my experience, is fairly underrated. Again, I don't know what the general opinion is on him, but a lot of what I've been seeing is Chroma sucks in a lot of places. So, in my experience, he seems to be an underrated frame. As you can see right now, this is me soloing, Boreal with Chroma, which just, in general shows you, what he is capable of. Yes, he is boring to play. I fully acknowledge that, and I understand where people are coming from with that. But, objectively speaking, he is one of the most useful frames right now, because of shit like that. Don't get me wrong, there are options to pick from that are just as useful, and in some cases more useful than he is. So you're not like, oh, use Chroma because he's the best, because he's not. Let's be real here. I'm not entirely sure what the best frame is, but it's definitely not him. But I digress. Either way, that'll be it. So thank you all for watching, and have a good one.